It's always in the news. Cybercriminals attacking great organizations, wreaking havoc on the trust of their brand.
We socialize cybersecurity for you to raise awareness.
Interviewing leaders who built and protect great brands.
We help talented people enter into this incredible field, and we share our research of blockbuster true cybercrime stories.
This is Cybercrime Junkies. And now the show.
All right. Well, welcome everybody to Cybercrime Junkies. I'm your host, David Morrow, and in the studio today, we are joined by our illustrious co-host, Mark Mosher this time. Mark, how are you today?
Doing wonderful, David. Thank you. Thank you. This is going to be an exciting episode. I'm really pumped
It
up
is.
to have the man himself back on.
We have been wanting to speak with our special guest, Jon DiMaggio, security researcher, well-known author with Analyst One. Just phenomenal research that you've done. And Jon, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, guys, for having me back. You know, I feel like we're family here. We gotta do like a once a month thing here. You know, I missed you guys.
Absolutely.
I love that idea.
You keep breaking stories, and I keep seeing you on TV. You'll be on every week. So
there'll be more coming
ridiculous.
up. So.
Yeah. Well, let's get into it. Let's find out. So last time we met, we talked about a notorious cybercrime gang specializing in ransomware. And as the listeners will understand, these ransomware gangs, they get known by the code that they develop, right? They get known by their brand, and their brand is often named after the ransomware code that they develop, right? In the case of Lockbit, there was Lockbit, then there was Lockbit 2.0, and now there's Lockbit 3.0. And the code that they developed, the methods, the operations wrapped around the code, how they execute it, how they launder money, etc. It's all a big. It's a pretty well developed criminal organization, right?
Yes, very mature. Correct.
So you were recently on National Geographic Trafficked. Congratulations!
Thank you.
That was it was a
great episode.
It was a really wild show, and because they started off the episode, I love the show generally, but they started off the episode with the Crips and the Bloods and how they're getting into account takeovers, and I was like, holy cow! I was like, where is this going? Like,
I was like, is this the right show?
Right, that's kind of the way I felt when it aired. I'm like, am I watching the right one?
Well, I was like, and when you had said you had gone undercover and been interviewed for the episode, I was thinking, I'm like, is he gonna like pop out of the corner? Is he like are they having him deal heroin too? Like, what are they having him do? Like, what is going on? And then for those, we'll have a link to the episode in the show notes. Check it out. Really, really impactful episode. Like, shocking. It blew my mind how the criminal gangs are getting into cybercrime because, as they explained, right? Why face, if I deal fentanyl, if I'm a gang member, right, and I deal fentanyl, I can go away for murder when somebody ODs on it, right? And that's happening. Whereas cybercrime, they might go away for 5 years or so if they get caught, and it's federal prison as opposed to state prison.
Right.
What I really picked up from that is the fact that it really shows the separation of having to have some type of basic skill set or knowledge to become a cyber criminal now. Like, these guys they're street thugs, common criminals.
Yeah. But
yet they're able to go and mine data off the dark web and start producing these scam cards and other things. That was kind of my takeaway. Is it's almost like, look, people, these are actual criminals now that are doing this type of behavior and coming after you and your family.
Yeah, it's
That's scary.
So first, tell us about what it was like to be on the show first. How's that? Yeah. Let's start there. Sure. So they approached you after your paper on Lockbit came out, or how did it go down?
Yeah, so actually they approached me originally. I put out that paper on Revol,
mm-hmm.
which where famous arguments and the dramatic fights that were taking place in the criminal forums. So when I finished the Revo research, I kind of transitioned into Lockbit. At the time, so when the show contacted me, they were looking for cyber researchers that had an expertise in tracking that particular group. At the time, I couldn't tell them the stuff that I was doing with fake personas and on the criminal forums and pretending to be other people and things like that, because I was right in the middle of the research. So that was all.
It was your cover, right?
Yes. So there was a lot of things going on behind the scenes in the background, I couldn't share with them. But for, as far as the show went, regardless of that, I think it would have been a lot more interesting if I could have shared that. But regardless of that, I felt like they did a really good job. But when they approached me, somebody to reach out and to we're meeting, and we're hoping that there's someone that can look at it, what files. We're going to ask them for aspects of their ransomware, and we're going to do an interview, but we want to know if we get any files or if we get anything back from them, is that something that you could look at for us? And while that's scary for them, that's Christmas for me. So I was like, right. Yes. Yeah. And so I think they had essentially, if I think I have this correctly, VX Underground brokered the deal for them, or he made the connections to broker the deal. VX Underground is a very well known. It's sort of a staple in the hacking community. They're nothing malicious. They're not. Maybe they once were, but they're more like just a well-connected historical place. They have a lot of data on both good and bad things that they store, and researchers really can use that as a resource. And so anyway, I believe they set up the actual deal with background. I started working kind of almost as like a consultant on Lockbit, and then after they talked to me enough, they were like, you explain things really well. It's not overly technical. You kind of tell a story when you do it. Do you want to participate in the show? And I was like, absolutely. And then, originally we were going to meet in DC and actually, do like a live filming there. I think there was a lot to share, but while there wasn't all in that show, the report that I released a couple, if that could have been public before I did the interview, I think there would have been a lot more discussion points.
That's right, because that's the timeline, right? You recorded your portion of the show, then you released you released your report, and then the show aired. Okay,
yes,
makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So for those that might have missed your first episode with us, and we'll have links to that in the show notes, or it's on our YouTube channel. Check that out because it'll blow your mind. But explain to everybody kind of your role with Analyst One and what it is that you guys do, because it's really cool. It's like the coolest job there is.
It is a cool job. Thank you. Yeah. So Analyst One, we are basically the company itself actually makes software for analysts like myself. So when we do threat investigations, a way to take all of the threat data, threat feeds, and we have all this computer threat related information, and they make it sort of humans. So you have security operations, research teams, and folks like that that use this to make sense of all of it and make decisions when you're under an attack. And for my part in the company, so I am sort of in my threat intelligence analyst role. I'm a one-man team for that. So all the stuff that I write and I do, that's my own research. And then as far as the company goes, I'm the chief security strategist for the organization. But the writing and the research is where that's really what my heart goes into. I love that. I love what I do. It was a hobby before it was my job. And I just really enjoy doing it.
That's so cool. So Lockbit. So let's talk about Lockbit.
Sure.
I've seen a lot of criminal gangs out there. I've seen a lot of criminal cyber gangs. These guys kind of go over the top. I mean, can you explain, and not to rehash what we covered in the first episode, but because part of that was about how they're recruiting and everything else, but this gang operates over in Eastern Europe, and They launch massive ransomware attacks that have been all over the news, right?
Yeah.
And they are by far the, if not one of the very top, most prolific, most dangerous ransomware gangs today. Is that
They
fair?
are. That is definitely fair.
So let's talk about their recruiting methods. Like on the dark web, they want to get people with some tech skills to join them, right? And they go through a series of tests to make sure that they can trust the person and that the person's got the right skill sets, right?
Yeah, it's not just a technical assessment that's done, but the more important part of that is sort of your reputation, who you've worked for, what compromises you've been a part in, who can validate or vouch for you. They generally want to make sure that they have very but it's kind of funny because they want the best hackers in the world to work for them, but they've made their ransomware so easy to manage and distribute during an attack. You really don't have to be an expert to do it. But
right. Your skill is getting people to click on the link or to download the attachment in order to launch it, right?
Well, even not now with their software, you don't even have to do that. You can actually put in a domain and it'll scan it, look for vulnerabilities, and if it finds one, it'll exploit it in real time on their public facing, their internet facing infrastructure. Obviously, yes, that's also one of the methods that you use is spear phishing. That's correct.
Wow.
Yes, and the same with once you're on the network with collecting information such as trying to enumerate the infrastructure, find shared drives, spread, gain administrative privileges. Even with the stealing of data now, you can put in a document type or a directory name or an extension type that you want, and it'll automatically go out, grab it, suck it up into the internet, and pop it back out on Lockbit's infrastructure. Previously they had to use like legitimate tools like rclone that were designed for legitimate purposes, and then they'd have to store it on a legitimate cloud provider's service. And the problem with that for them was all that it would take was either law enforcement or the provider shutting that down, and they'd lose access. So that's why you're seeing gangs like Lockbit that now host all of that on their own infrastructure to prevent that from happening. When they basically just, like I said, they made it point and click. You put in the domain, you click some radio dial buttons, you put in the parameters of what you want, and you click go. And actually, it's like you put, let's get Lockbit Black or something like that at the bottom, and you click it, and it goes out, and it attempts to do all this. But think about it. Even if everything's not successful, because it's probably more of the times than not, it probably isn't 100% perfectly run where it does everything for you. But even if it's 60 to 80%, that used to take attackers, like 3 to 21 days in an operational network to conduct an attack. These guys now can do it hours to days because of this. So even if part of it's successful, it saves them so much time. And everything's managed from this one central console. You can manage your victims, you can do the chat negotiation, you deploy the attack, you steal and collect the data. Everything is done for there. That is, in my opinion, so successful is the ease of use that they've used to develop their software or their ransomware, but as they call it, their software, it's a legitimate tool for them. And because of their profit sharing model, most ransomware groups, the ransomware provider, the sort of the core gang, controls all the money, and after an attack, then they pay the affiliates. And with Lockbit, he lets them control the money and then pay him his percentage when he's done. And because of that, there is an inherent trust in this sort of like cult following that they have with affiliate hackers, unfortunately.
Okay, so many questions. Can we back up just a second?
Sure.
So there's Lockbit 2.0, Lockbit 3.0. Now Lockbit Black is this kind of automated enhancement to Lockbit 3.0, right? And it automatically will. Can you kind of elaborate on that for us?
Yeah, so it's confusing because there's the internal names and there is the public names. And so the internal names, when I was doing all this stuff, you had, so first it was Lockbit Red, which is publicly known as Lockbit 2, publicly known as Lockbit 3.0. And now there's Lockbit Green, which doesn't have a number, but is actually a stolen, they stole the source code that was leaked. I just didn't steal it. It was leaked, and then they used it and they altered it from Conti. When Conti was leaked and some of their code got leaked, they obtained that, they altered it, and they're calling it Lockbit Green. And that's one of the new things that they're doing is it looks like they're going out and trying to get other versions of ransomware, so that if an affiliate's conducting an attack and they're using Lockbit's management console and Lockbit, let's just say that Lockbit's ransomware payload gets detected by security software, well, now they haven't wasted all their time. They have multiple other payloads from other competing ransomware gangs, and they've just altered them to change it so that the payment and negotiations come back to Lockbit, and now they're facilitating that attack. So it's basically a way to keep more affiliates working for them and happy. What they do kind of reminds me of, when you have, a really good resource, whether it's a website or whether it's an app on your phone or software, and you tell they really focused on that. In the criminal world, that's exactly what this is.
So let me ask you this. The cult following that they have of these affiliates that are very loyal to them and they're building up their army. You said that what's unique about Lockbit is they let them manage the money and pay the core Lockbit group their cut of it. What in your research, and we're going to get into this in just a second now, in your research, like what happens if they don't? Do they what?
Good question.
I mean, I know there's
They're
honor
criminals, right?
Yeah, I know there's honor among thieves, but okay, what happens? I'm sure there are instances where
it absolutely. I know for a fact that it happens. But here's the thing. Most criminals do pay, and the reason that they do is they're so, sounds strange, but they're so happy with not just the development of using the ransomware and the admin panel and all those resources, but Lockbit's constantly asking them for feedback on improvements and what they want to see in the next version.
They want to be able to use it again. They want to be able to continue to use it.
And they're the customer of Lockbit. So Lockbit's providing these criminal hackers with a service, and he is apparently doing it well because they keep coming back to him. But that's how they look at it. That's the reason they're willing to pay, is because if they don't, and then they have to go to a competitor that's not going to have the same level of quote customer service and development in their software, their job's harder. So it has happened, and it does happen, but for the most part, they do pay, and it works out for him. But since they came out with Lockbit Black, and the differences from the other Lockbit 3.0 and Lockbit Black, same thing, but the differences from the previous versions is each iteration they add more functionality and they make it easier to use. So once
more automation, less. So we've talked in the past about IABs, internet or like initial access brokers, people that are just out there, the thousands of hackers that find a vulnerability, or former employees who have a grudge against the company, whatever it is, and they go and they sell access. We've talked in the past about initial access brokers and how they have all this access to ABC company, right? And they sell that for a couple grand on the dark web, and then they're not involved in the ransomware attack, the extortion, the money laundering, etc. How does Lockbit Black, this kind of almost complete automation that will scan for vulnerabilities and find them and then launch it, how does that affect the relationship with IABs, initial access brokers?
Yeah, well, they still use them. Lockbit providing the service and the resources to make the attack as easy as possible, but it's still up to the affiliates to actually do the breach and the compromise. So like I said, it doesn't always work because you're not going to always have vulnerable infrastructure or have a person click on a spear phishing email. And so in those instances, affiliate hackers still go and purchase access from those brokers in order to facilitate an attack. At the end of the day, whether they obtain that access from something that Lockbit is helping them do or whether they've done it on their own, if they don't get in, they don't get paid. So
it's commission based. Them. It's fully commission based.
It is. They'll spend $6 grand to get access, and they'll make millions of dollars. I mean, You know, it's literally crazy, but it's that simple sometimes, and that's exactly what they do. So those brokers are still, you know, they're probably getting more business because the attacks are easier to facilitate, you know, because once you have access, you still use their tool and their panel. You know, you're not having to manually go in and run commands and write scripts and do all this other stuff. You know, you still just use their software once you're inside, and it still makes your life easier as a criminal.
So you mentioned that Lockbit calls it a software, right? They don't call it a ransomware tool or an extortion mechanism, right?
Correct. They call themselves pen testers.
Right. Is it
they're providing a pen testing service.
A pen testing service.
An unrequested pen testing service.
Right. And you're paying for that. You're not paying a ransom. You're paying for their service of making your network safer. That is how they look at it.
Interesting. Interesting. So let me ask you this. In the countries that they operate, is it because they essentially, there really is no, there might be laws on the books, but there's nothing, and I don't even know that there are. I mean, it depends on which person and the specific segment of the crime. But in particularly, they're really operating without any legal ramifications.
Correct. You know, as long as they're not doing an attack against, you know, Russian organizations, Russian infrastructure, you know, they're not going to be looked at by law enforcement. They're not going to get arrested. You know, the only arrest we ever saw was with Revil, and that was because, you know, so yeah, they're not facing arrest. What they don't fear or I mean, sure, it is a fear, but that's not their main fear. Arrest is not their main fear. Their main fear is having their money seized and then being forced to support the Russian government and work for, you know, them to do, you know, stuff with the war against Ukraine or other adversaries of Russia. And, you know, obviously, if you're working for the FSB, you're not making the kind of money you're making as a criminal hacker. So I think that is, or I don't think, I know that is the larger fear, because you just don't see the arrests. The arrests that you see, the arrests that you hear about and you read about and you see have always been affiliates. I can't think of
people
an instance,
low down on the totem pole.
Yeah. I can't think of an instance where the core gang has been arrested. I mean, they said that it was with Revil, but I don't know that I believe that was who was arrested, but different conversation. But yeah, really, there's no arrest to be made unless they leave and they go to somewhere that is a U.S. or U.S. allied country, or any, I guess, a country where they have laws that are enforced with those sort of computer crimes. But for the most part, if they stay in Russia or in any of the CIS states, they're safe.
Yep. And the risk we all have is every time we get online, we enter their world, right?
Correct. Yes.
So let's talk about, you've mentioned Lockbit and you said he. It's like Mr. Lockbit.
Mr. Lockbit.
Yeah. Can you elaborate? And maybe even before, let's talk about who the head person is or head couple people are there. But then I want to go into, how did you find that out? Like, did you don like a ninja outfit and like scale down? Like, I want to know how you went undercover as much as you're allowed to
right, as much as you can say.
Yeah, no, it wasn't a ninja outfit. It was a black rubber Batman suit, but pretty close.
Excellent. Excellent.
I'm kidding. No, so Lockbit, I say he. So they use a persona on the criminal forum. So there's a couple of different aspects of Lockbit. Let me just explain that real quick. There's their own infrastructure. There's criminal forums, and then on a few occasions, there's markets to sell data. The criminal forums, they're associating, you know, with criminals. So that persona's interaction is different than it would be if you're talking to a victim. So that persona is the actual gang members themselves. And my opinion, there are two people that man that account. There's some other researchers that feel that there's three, but regardless, it's not one person. And you know, those people though is the leader, and there are different ways to tell which one you're talking to because their personalities are a little bit different. There's been an occasion where I've actually found one, it's the same account, but one will tell you one thing and the other will tell you another. It's rare, but it does happen. And then there are, and this is this is secondhand knowledge because I'm not an expert on the dialect, but there has been some people looked at the language and actually said that there is times where the slang and the way that they write, that it's probably someone from a different area than the other primary account is used. The person behind the account is used. So different regional locations, you have different slang, different talk. So yeah, there's evidence that there's more than one person. But again, my opinion, there's two, and I think one is probably a little bit younger, and the other one is more mature, senior in the gang, the leader of the gang, things like that. But the way to answer your second, I find them, it really starts with just figuring out their footprint on the dark web, what resources they use, what criminal forums they live in, and then how do you get into those forums? What are the requirements? Does someone have to vouch for you? Can anyone access it? Do you have to buy your way in? And each forum has different requirements. But really, once you get that access, then there's two ways to do it. Just getting access, you can see some things, but you have to build credibility, and you're almost ranked by your experience, and things of that nature. So you have to build that up, and as you do that, you'll gain more access. And then the third place is actually going directly into the chat rooms with Lockbit and some of their criminal element directly. And that's obviously the harder part to do, because now you're literally one-on-one talking with around him, and a lot of their.
So you were speaking. I'm sorry to interrupt because there was a little glitch on the technology. You were speaking one-on-one with the head people at Lockbit when you were undercover.
Yes, correct. That's how I got all the information. Like, I don't think anybody doubts that after they read the report. When I would tell people that at the right before I launched the report, people are yeah, okay. But then when you read the report, you're like, oh wow, because it explains, we know all this stuff publicly, and now I'm showing like the screenshots explaining and connecting all these dots of what happened behind the scenes in reality from the human aspect. And when you overlay that on top of the technical threat evidence, it just makes for an awesome story.
Yeah, exactly. So did you have to take tests in order to get access, or did they have to did they vouch for you? Like, how did they verify that you were legit as an undercover person?
So, well, there's sort of a two-part answer. So for the forum part, I would use you sort of use one to build up another and to vouch for you and to get credibility. And it's sort of a long-term development role where you're always developing stuff in the background. And then you kind of have two that you use proactively. One is your main and one is your backup, and they sort of support each other. And then, believe it or not, there's other security researchers that do similar type of work that are out there, and we'll help each other sometimes too. But once you do that, you get access to these forums. You can see a lot of these conversations, and there's a wealth of knowledge there. The next step, though, is if you want to actually try and become an affiliate and gain access to tools and resources. They have, basically that they would have like openings for, it's just like a job advertisement where they're actually recruiting, and they have a set of rules of what you have to meet in order to get this job, and you can apply to it. And it's through this private, it's software. It's called Tox, and it's basically just an encryption software that's it doesn't sit on a server. It sits on each endpoint, communicates, and encrypts, and then communicates with one another. And they use that, so you have to have their ID. And when you go in and you apply, basically you say you want to work with them. They want to, they'll start asking who what you've done, who you participated with in attacks before. These are all things they can validate pretty easily, because what a lot of people don't realize is most of these gangs know one another and can communicate with another and access each other, and they can validate a lot of this. The second piece, which where I probably failed miserably is the technical assessment, because I'm not a hacker. You know, I understand how everything works, the principles and the things behind it, but personally, I don't hack things. So, you know, I didn't pass that. So I didn't become an affiliate, but, you know, I still had all the access to that one-on-one and to the talks channel, and to talk to them and to you know, hear the conversations and see the things that they were saying. And I don't know if they just forgot about me, or if, you know, they just liked me enough to keep me around, or what. But
so were you able to, in your conversations with them, identify some of the criteria they have for recruiting? Like last time we spoke, they have like this culture. They have this this mission statement for like their code of conduct, which is a weird concept.
yes,
Can you explain that to us?
yeah, well, it's sort of it's matured over time, and it actually the reason that it matured actually started with different ransomware gangs. So Revil sort of really, they weren't the first to do this, but they were probably the most prolific at it, and they had their ads out there. And originally, like for example, they would only take hackers that were in Russia. You had to be a Russian nationalist. And I had applied back in the day with them too, failed that also. But I didn't get very far with that one, because they asked me questions about Russian folklore, which so I didn't get very far with. So time as they grew, they realized they need more than just people living in Russia to help them to facilitate worldwide attacks if they wanted to be a big player. So I think Lockbit saw that. So they never had that requirement that you had to be in Russia. And I think they were smarter at that approach, you know, because they hired affiliate hackers from all over the world. And that and their software are one of the reasons that they have such a high volume of attacks compared to most other ransomware groups.
So in your communications with them, was it mostly in Russian? Did you have a translator with you? Do you speak Russian?
Yeah,
and
I don't speak Russian.
Like, yeah, okay. Yeah, that's how I was like, how did it happen?
So yeah, I didn't want to have to deal with you know, having a translator to help me with all this if I didn't have to. So what I did this time, it was actually an idea from a colleague, but you know, it was high probability that Lockbit didn't speak German, and so we just started out as that we were German hackers and started speaking German, and almost immediately they're like, yeah, we don't speak German. But I knew, you know, they all speak a little bit of English, because that's most targets are English speaking countries, or a lot of targets. So, and that was one of the things that Weakers was in the recruitment ad. So it was just like, okay, well, they probably speak English too. So then you just start speaking in broken English and say, hey, let's communicate this way. And you just have to make sure that you don't do it too well to give yourself away. And that made it much easier to communicate. And because I wasn't like a core affiliate, because I didn't get that far, you know, there wasn't a lot of scrutiny. But like I said, I never really understood why I kept having the access that I did. But even if I'd lost that access, to be honest with you, the best part of the story, you know, really came from the forums and watching the drama between Lockbit and some of the other gangs, and then the things that they would divulge during these heated, you know, arguments and stuff. What
were they arguing about? Yeah, well, okay.
That's what I wanted to ask. Is there some type of rivalry in these chat rooms that they're all in? And I mean, filled with a lot of affiliates from other gangs?
Yeah, a lot of affiliates and other criminal gangs. They all live. There's a couple of forums, but there's one particular that they spend their time on. And Lockbit is one of their things they're really good at is what I'm going to call PR and propaganda. And I'm going to, just because I've used them as an example, because there's different ones, but let's just go. When Revil was the top gang, Lockbit started this propaganda campaign. And if you remember, there was a hospital in Alabama that came under a ransomware attack and a baby died. That made, you know, worldwide headlines. And, you know, Lockbit took that headline and went to the forums and was basically like, look what Revil did. Like, you know, they go after children, you know, because that's the one thing that even criminals, you know, draw the line at, or at least some of them, is things that hurt criminals. And they just went in this big smear campaign, just bashing Revil. And Revo got upset and started arguing back with them, and they're just they're going back and forth with this thing. And in reality, because there's court paperwork on this, and the ransom note and the ransomware that was used, when you actually go look at the court paperwork, was Ryuk, which was ran by the same people who did the Conti ransomware operation. And so there was never any evidence that it was them, but early on they used that as propaganda to make people think that it was them, and it worked. Their reputation started to become tarnished, and many other things happened to tarnish Revo's reputation after that. But my point is, they do this regularly. There's been multiple other competing ransomware gangs where they have done this, working with the FBI, or they've been infiltrated, or they'll claim that someone is actually working with the FSB as well, and that takes away from them being able to treat their service or their business with the level that they can, and things like that. So there's lots of different things that have happened. Even the most recent trying to steal ransomware from another gang, trying to get the source code, stealing a developer. They stole the primary developer from so if you guys remember the Colonial Pipeline, the person who developed the ransomware, for the Colonial Pipeline hack, they're called DarkSide, and they went away and came back as Black Matter. It's not a far leap from dark side to black matter, but anyway, hold on, that's a different conversation as well on their creativity with their names. But he was their developer.
Lockbit poached the talent from Black Matter.
Yeah, and they had been friendly up until that point, and once that happened, that developer went over there. That caused a big rivalry there, and it all played out on the criminal forums, and in it, it just went south, and lots of details were divulged about. Not only was DarkSide Matter, but then Black Matter went away, and then they became Black Cat, also known as Alpha V, and you got the leader of Lockbit basically putting this all out there, and as well as the developer also worked for another crime group called Fin7 back in the day. And so anyway, I'm just taking notes and making drawings and diagrams and connecting all this, and it was awesome.
A lot of similar players. Oh yeah, we followed that whole evolution between DarkSide to Black Matter, and now Alpha 7, and they were just in the news for a pretty big breach, ransomware attack. Holy cow! Which was Lockbit? Let me ask you. There was one that was involved. One of these gangs that was involved in the children's hospital up in Canada, and then they fired and severed ties with the affiliate. Wasn't that Lockbit? Because I saw the PR around it. Yeah, that's what I thought, because the PR around it was like, we don't do that. It's in our code of conduct. We don't do that. We have severed ties with the affiliate. This affiliate went rogue, basically committed a criminal act, in our opinion.
Well, so a lot of that was PR for the public to see. Behind the scenes, it was not considered as big of a deal until it became a public. They do to attack hospitals, but they still do it all the time, and you don't see them giving the decryption key for free every time they do that. They did it in this case. Maybe because it was children, maybe they didn't like that legitimately, but what I'm saying is, it wasn't made like this. Oh, we don't stand for that. We're firing. We're severing ties. We're not doing this. That didn't get to that level until the public perception came down on them. Because here's the thing: they don't want the government coming after them. I mean, obviously, governments come after them, but not in the level like they did with DarkSide when they attacked Colonial Pipeline, or like with Evil Corp, where they pressed sanctions against them. Everything.
Right.
That's what they want.
They don't want heat.
From.
Just like any criminal organization, they don't want heat. They don't want the attention. They want to go about their daily business. Everybody kind of knows that they're there, but they don't want the attention to be drawn right on them. Interesting stuff. What are your thoughts, Mark?
I'm about whether or not these rival gangs are aware of each other's development of either recruiting or code or techniques or tactics, if they try and almost gather intel on the other ones.
Yeah.
So, John, how about that? Do the gangs, are they aware of each other's development of their business model, whether it be in recruiting or in code and exploits that are being used or ransom collected or targets collected? Are they aware of what the others are doing, maybe to help even grow their own,
Yeah, not only are they aware of what they do, many, like I said, many of them know one another. The affiliates, the good affiliates work for multiple ransomware groups at the same time. Often they know a lot of the same key players.
Okay. Wow.
Yes. So the different
data with one another.
Yeah. So the different, so one single affiliate can work for Black Matter, Alpha 7, and Lockbit, right? And carry out, execute different campaigns, right?
That's correct. And there was, maybe it was like a month ago, maybe it's 2 months ago, but somebody called me and they were like, hey, it was before the Hive takedown, but they were like, hey, have you ever seen Lockbit working with Hive or some sort of joint association? And I was like, no, I haven't. I mean, that's what it was, is they deployed one of those payloads. It was detected. So they deployed another one because it was affiliate that worked for both. And again, that goes back to what I originally said of why Lockbit wants to bring all that in-house. But it didn't mean that it was a direct relationship. Where you would see a direct relationship would be if, okay, well, I'm seeing the same source code used in both of these, or hey, I'm seeing the leader of the group claim that they worked with this other group, or I see them talking and collaborating. But again, you got to go get that access to figure that part out. But yeah, many of them know, like I said, know one another, work with each other, share resources. They don't necessarily like each other, but it's such a small community, and really, it's very, very small and well connected.
Unbelievable. So what is on the horizon for you, Jon? What's coming up next? Are we doubling down on Lockbit? Are we targeting somebody else? What can you share with us?
So I am working on the Ransomware Diaries Volume 2 right now. It's what I'll say is, well, let me just explain what happened after I wrote the report. And this is part of it. After I wrote this report, a week after, or maybe it was the day after. Actually, it was the day after. Yeah, it was January 17th. Lockbit, on one of the forums that they're on, they changed their avatar. And they took my face from either Twitter or from LinkedIn, and they put that as their avatar. So I knew at that point that that they were definitely paying attention to me. So I thought that was interesting. And then and one of the things that I saw was, with my face on this forum, they're getting with one of the former leaders of Conti. If you remember Conti Leaks, one of the key leaders of that was a guy went by the moniker Batty. Well, Batty and Lockbit Sup were in this heated argument because Batty realized that Lockbit was trying to steal his source code. And that's how I connected the dots of what they're actually doing. He's got Conti's source code, now he's going after this. And Lockbit Sup was like saying, hey, I just want to prove that my ransomware is faster and better than yours, and if I need it, and I don't like to just say things, so I want to test it and show those metrics on our site. Of course, that's not true. He wanted to steal it, so he could use it for
Wow.
because he had a big blowout with his developer the one that he had stolen from Black. I don't look at the leader her. I look at him as a business person, and the reason I say that is because he's not making his own code. He's not doing the hacks. He's bringing in resources, the software development, making sure that his clients are happy and things like that. So yeah, it's a different model than most other ransomware groups for sure. But yeah, so they were getting this argument with my face. So anyway, to answer your question, the next element of the Ransomware Diaries, the Volume 2, it kind of starts where we left off and gets into that. And there's a whole other piece, but that part I can't get into right now. But there's some big aspects to it that'll be pretty interesting. I don't know if I can ever beat the Volume 1, but this will be close.
Well, we're excited about seeing that. Is it primarily focused on Lockbit, or is it going to be about a couple of the different gangs? Because there seems to be blending between several of them.
From there,
I mean, Is the next Ransomware Diaries going to be focused solely on Lockbit, or is it going to be kind of a blend and the evolution of several of these gangs?
Yeah, so it definitely is not. It's going to start with where I left off and sort of lead with Lockbit, and it's going to go a little bit in a different direction. For reasons that would affect what I'm doing right now, I can't say exactly what that is. But it does. It definitely is going to still have Lockbit as a core player, but it's going to have this. It's going to center around some other activity.
Excellent. Well, as soon as that comes out,
really high, yes.
Yeah, as soon as that comes out, we're going to have you back so that we can.
Yeah, we're going to talk all about that one.
We can get the inside scoop.
It's going to be a good one for sure.
Before we wrap up, let me ask you: the U.S. Cybersecurity strategy was released a couple weeks ago on Thursday. About 2 weeks ago, this coming Thursday, or 3 weeks ago, this coming Thursday. Do you see any? In your role at either Analyst One or with the people that you talk to, are you seeing this time it looks different than in the past? I mean, I know that the language is stronger and they're talking about going on the offensive, which is all good, but in the past they've issued these and a lot of people in the community are like, yeah, but what's really going to happen? Or, until the legislation comes in and the laws change, what all can happen? And I'm a eternal optimist, so I kind of want it to happen or things to change. What are you thinking? What's your sense? What's your gut telling you? What are you hearing?
Yeah. What I think is at least the end goal here is to the changes that we're seeing is to sort of provide the government organizations with the right authorities to go after ransomware gangs. So you got to remember, before ransomware, it was just such a different game. One, you never talked to the attacker; they never talked to you, and two, there was never this volume of attacks that were successful. So if you recall, with with I think it was with DarkSide, the FBI went after them and was able to obtain their wallet and get a bunch of that money back. And a judge had to sign off on that before they could go do it. And that's on public record. You can go see that. But with Revol, when stuff happened, there was no judge signing off on it. And that told me that must have been an intelligence agency. And I don't think I got those backwards. But anyway, and so what I think is sort of a learning point from that is when there are certain high-profile ransomware gangs that are affecting national security, intelligence organizations need to have the authorities where they can act immediately. And so, while it didn't directly say that in that policy update or whatever verbiage is, it seems to me like that was underlying the direction that we seem to be heading in, and I do think that's a good thing.
Excellent. Well, hopefully, time will tell, and we're going to stay in touch with you along the way, if you don't mind. Like we love your work. We're honored to have you on as a guest. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jon. So we will talk soon, and we'll have links to your Ransomware Diaries Volume 1 and the show Trafficked on National Geographic, which you can stream from every device possible. So thank you so much. Oh, of course. The book that I have on my shelf.
This is the one behind you. Yeah, the one behind you right there.
Yeah, the one right behind me, which is a phenomenal book. We will have that linked. I do apologize for that. I just figured everybody had it by now.
And we just assumed everybody already had the book.
Right.
I just figured you have a winter chalet in Russia by now, like where you can go and meet them for coffee or something. Thanks so much, Jon.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jon.
Appreciate it. Great discussion.
Guys, take care as well. Thank you.
Hey, well, that's a wrap. Thank you for listening. Our next episode starts right now.
Please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's free, and download the podcast episodes available everywhere you get podcasts.
To support our show and get exclusive pre-release episodes and bonus content, please subscribe to Cybercrime Junkies Prime.
Link in the description and show notes. And thanks for being a cybercrime junkie.